Hi, it's Myozan Kodo from Zen Buddhism Ireland and Blue Mountain White Clouds Hermitage. And we're continuing our reading of Suzuki Roshi's Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, which we've been engaging in for a few months now. We're now on page 38, The Marrow of Zen. And in this chapter, in a way, Suzuki Roshi is talking about the first shall be last and the last shall be first. It's a kind of a Zen equivalent of this. In our scriptures, it is said that there are four kinds of horses: excellent ones, good ones, poor ones, and bad ones. The best horse will run slow and fast, right and left at the driver's will, before it sees the shadow of the whip. The second best will run as well as the first one does, just before the whip reaches its skin. The third will run when it feels pain on its body. The fourth will run after the pain penetrates to the marrow of its bones. You could imagine how difficult it is for the fourth one to learn how to run. This great Zen master then points out that in the traditional reading of the story, most of us want to be the first horse. We want to be the excellent champion. But how, in fact, in the tradition of compassion that belongs to Zen and in the practice of compassion that comes from Shakyamuni Buddha, that the Buddha himself would value the fourth horse the most, the worst in conventional terms. And how, in fact, the person who sits perfectly with great physical ease and posture very often falls away from Zen practice, and the person who struggles with their own imperfections and difficulties and sticks at it, in some way gains the marrow of Zen, the very core of the teachings. I think we know this in life in many ways. I mean, we see, for example, in art, we see someone who can draw perfectly, a great draftsman, often can capture a likeness with great precision, but possibly it has a kind of soullessness, and a rougher piece of work that's executed with its imperfections can be full of meaning and emotion and expression. Well, in our Zen practice, it is the person who endeavors, who tries, who gets to the cushion again and again, despite their failings and despite the difficulties of the practice. This is the person who probably gains most. I mean, in this non-gaining practice, but this person certainly is a student of great sincerity, because of their humility and because of their willingness to continue to work and sit and work on themselves. When you are determined to practice Zazen with the great mind of Buddha, you will find the worst horse is the most valuable one. In your very imperfections, you will find the basis for your firm, way-seeking mind. And indeed, it is our imperfections rather than our perfections that bring us to the Buddha Dharma in the first place. It is the stresses, the strains of life, the gaping needs within ourselves. It is samsara that brings us to seek nirvana. And so this came up in some of the earlier chapters, how our very imperfections are, in fact, in many ways, our perfections. And indeed, even the dualism of this understanding has moved beyond in the direct apprehension of reality, which Zen is engaged in. When we reflect on what we are doing in our daily life, we are always ashamed of ourselves. One of my students wrote to me saying, and he gives an example of this, And he goes on to talk about Dogen's Shoshaku Jushaku, which is continuous mistake, continuous practice and continuous mistake. And in a way, this understanding that Suzuki Roshi is presenting to us of the fourth horse, the worst horse, having to try and try again and fall and get up again and try again. This is the authentic way of Zen. It's encapsulated in the four vows, which I think is so well written about in a book like Living by Vow, for example. The four vows: to save all sentient beings, though beings numberless; to transform all delusions, though delusions inexhaustible; to perceive reality, though reality is boundless; and to attain the enlightened way, a way non-attainable. This endless, unending practice, which never has a goal, a final goal, is what's being discussed here. Sorry, just had to get the kids back into bed there. So back to what I was saying. We're discussing the marrow of Zen. When you feel disagreeable, it is better for you to sit. There is no other way to accept your problem and work on it. Whether you are the best horse or the worst, or whether your posture is good or bad, is out of the question. Everyone can practice Zazen, and in this way work on his problems and accept them. Zazen, this long training, this endless training that I was referring to a few minutes ago, where we practice always here and always now in the condition in which we find ourselves, because we can be no other place but where we are. Within this here and now is where we find the way, not in some future end goal. So it is here and now with this body and mind that we practice always, without exception. And it is now that liberation is available to us at all times, now and now and now. So this endless practice is what I'm talking about. And I mean, if you could take the idea of someone who's addicted to a substance in some ways, and they in their most of the time they're intoxicated, but in their moments of lucidity, they think, this is the authentic me. Why do I live like this? Why is my life like this? I must stay away from this intoxication. And now I see things clearly. And a few hours later, they're intoxicated again. This goes on, and this pattern goes on. And it's maybe a very imperfect analogy, but in some ways, this is our practice. It is the practice of returning to awakening, returning again and again, returning to the present, returning to our compassionate and open heart. And this endless practice sees us failing again and picking ourselves up with humility and with sincerity to try and begin again in each moment. And this long and hard and difficult as well as joyful training is available to us then. Suzuki Roshi in this chapter talks about a man with, suppose your children are suffering from a hopeless disease, something totally awful, and how it is in the position of Zazen that we should sit Zazen at these most difficult times. And this is where the training, we see that the fruits in some ways of the training, although we never seek these fruits. No other activity will appease your suffering. In other restless positions, you have no power to accept your difficulties. But in the Zazen posture, which you have acquired by long, hard practice, your mind and body have great power to accept things as they are, whether they are agreeable or disagreeable. And he goes on to say in the final paragraph of this chapter, when you are sitting in the middle of your own problems, which is more real to you, your problems or yourself, the awareness that you are here right now is the ultimate fact. This is the point you will realize by Zazen practice. In continuous practice, under a succession of agreeable and disagreeable situations, you will realize the marrow of Zen and acquire its true strength. So, Zen helps us live our lives. Zen is our lives. And the fact that it's a difficult practice, I think, is undeniable. But let its difficulty not scare us. If we practice with sincerity, with real effort, with humility, and with perseverance, and I think ultimately with joy in the middle of these imperfections. And this is how we can find liberation right where we find ourselves here and now. Where else could we be? So thanks for your attention. And I can hear the children coming again, I think. So I'm going to be called away from the computer again. So thanks for your practice. If you have any comments or questions, drop me a line at myozankodo@gmail.com, and see you next time.